Hello, and welcome to podcast number 5 of the Your OKC Property Manager podcast. Today's episode is titled OKC Metro Area Homeowners: How to Remove Risk from Renting Out Your Property. We've got a lot to cover.
Mhm.
Let's hop right in. I'm
Okay.
here with Scott Nachatilo, broker and
Hi.
owner. Hi, broker and owner of OKC Home Realty Services LLC, one of the top property management companies in the Oklahoma City metro area. So today with Scott, we're going to be breaking down this topic today. Be sure to like this episode if you learned something new. So hi, Scott.
Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for being on here today to talk to us about mitigating some of the risks when
Yeah.
renting out your property.
Thanks for hopping on with me on this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First question is, what are some of the biggest concerns property owners typically face when renting out their property for the first time?
Well, as you might guess, I get the opportunity to talk a lot to a lot of people like that. Like a lot of times they're really kind of iffy about putting a tenant into the property. And it's, because of a lot of times it's because of the horror stories that they've heard. And kind of the bottom line is, there's always a risk that the tenant will stop paying rent at some point, and they can also damage the property, and it could wind up in eviction court. It's there you can never 100% guarantee that you'll never have to do an eviction on a tenant. There are there's some ways to greatly reduce that risk, which we cover here. But you can, there's always like even the tiniest bit of risk that you'll have to do that at some point.
I see. So, how common is it for property owners to have difficulty finding reliable tenants, especially if they like self-manage their properties?
hmm Right, right. It's very common, and especially right this time of year, which I'm not sure when you're watching this, but right now we're shooting in kind of mid-December, and it's always slow between like Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so, we're that doesn't mean we're stopped. We're doing a lot of like getting a lot of applications, doing a lot of leasing. We really hustle this time of year to get every last little bit of good tenants that we possibly can. So we're offering move-in specials and things of that nature. But we end up we're never in a hurry to put someone in a property unless they're well qualified. If they can't cross all the T's and dot all the I's, they're probably not a good fit for us. And the thing that I think hampers a lot of property owners is that they don't have as many avenues to get the word out about their property as a company like ours. We post our listings on about 20 different websites, the MLS, a lot of different places. So that still doesn't guarantee that properties are going to just rent automatically. We have quite a few where it takes a little bit. It takes a little bit of time to advertise. Sometimes we'll have to go through several sets of applicants before we wind up with some residents or some tenants who really want the place, and they're qualified. But they're qualified and meet all of our guidelines for like leasing a property, especially if this person hasn't screened thousands and thousands of applications like we have. They really kind of don't know the little things to look for. They may have a list of things, but just being able to like quickly identify um, the uh, the potential problems or the things on the application that the average person might miss. And in this day and age of fraud, there's a lot of fraudulent documents that get submitted, and you have to kind of have an eye for that. Um, and not believe everything that you see. So I think also having the consistency of checking the same boxes every single time on an application, and just not letting people slide on certain things. And the other thing is the following the fair housing laws, which basically which says that you need to treat all your applicants the same, or you're violating federal law. And so it's always a good idea to take as little risk as possible when it comes to things like being compliant with the law, and a property management company can help a lot with that, because it's kind of on them. Like, we're supposed to know what those standards are, and we're supposed to comply with all those standards, so that the average person out there doesn't have to worry about that.
I see. So when you're talking about finding quality tenant and doing that in a fair way, what steps do you take to fully vet tenants before you place them in a property? Can you walk us through your process?
Sure, yeah. And I like to tell people, look, we're not the FBI. And we're not going to waterboard people to make sure that they pay on time, but we can fully vet those people. And
Right.
so, like, some of the things we do are pull their credit report, and there's a lot of things on the credit report other than just looking at, well, what's their credit score, which that's important. But there's also a lot of information you can look at just to kind of verify. The credit report will almost always show who their employer is. It'll show a lot of times 2 or 3 of their previous addresses. It's a good way to check in and verify information. We also check their pay stubs, and just look at the take home pay based on their pay stubs to see whether or not they can afford the property. And our standard for that is that their take home pay needs to be at least 3 times the rent. It's not, then they don't meet that income qualification standard. Another thing is their employer and their landlords. So we reach out to them to check those verifications. And then kind of the last thing is checking court records to see if there's been any criminal activity going on. Now, of course, we have like written standards and specific things that we look for. And just because someone, like maybe they had a felony on their criminal background, but let's say it happened 20 years ago, does that mean that that person would not make for a good tenant? Usually the answer to that is it doesn't mean that at all. People can and do change, and people make mistakes, and we all have made some mistake when we were younger, and a lot, quite frankly, a lot of us just didn't get caught. So we will take that into consideration, but we have like really careful standards, and we always try to treat every applicant in the same manner, so that we don't end up violating fair housing laws.
Hmm. I like what you said. We can't waterboard, but we can vet them.
And we
So
can vet them,
how,
yes.
yeah, why is thorough tenant screenings so important, and how does it protect property owners?
Well, if you don't have a good tenant in the problem, when I say good tenant, I'm basically saying, look, they've got a source of income that's not going to go away. They've got a track record, kind of prove out that they've been like either maybe they sometimes they've sold a home, and for whatever reason they're kind of going back into the renting a property mode. That sometimes happens. Sometimes people get divorced. One of the couple has to rent a place, and so it's always it's just important to see what get documented the track record of that person. And there should be a way to do that, and definitely just not like rolling the dice to put someone in the property. Look, and we all get kind of antsy, and but it's never a good idea to rush approving an applicant too much, because it'll almost always end up biting you.
So, how does your company do showings and how does that impact the process?
We only do in-person showings. Look, the main reason that we do in-person showings versus, there's a lot of companies out there they'll just basically throw a lockbox on a property. They'll give out the code to complete strangers. But, we're not really comfortable in doing that, especially with someone else's house that they're trusting us to take care of their property and to respect it like they would. But when we have someone meet them at the property, we'll be there to answer the questions about how things work with our property management company. We have some specific programs that they're probably not going to get anywhere else. Like we have something called the resident benefit package, which provides air filters. It reports the good credit for the tenant, and there's some other benefits on there which the tenants pay for that service. You really have to have someone at the showing to explain what those benefits are, and why and how that is definitely to their benefit to be involved with that. So and like a lot of times, the particular house that they're in, there's just something about it that doesn't exactly match what they're looking for, but that agent can be right there to suggest another property for them to look at. And so that's a lot of the time how we end up leasing or matching up a tenant to a property is that the leasing agent there will suggest another one that we also have for lease.
I see.
And so and the way that it protects the owner is that it's just it gets houses rented quicker. We're not just, like I said, we're not just giving out a code, giving out keys to strangers. We don't do that.
So, how does your tenant screening process differ from what landlords might do on their own or something that a different property management company would do?
Well, we do end up, we're fairly strict, and we do things really by the book. We're not going to cut corners. Even if it takes a little bit longer, which sometimes it does, a little bit longer, we're just not in a hurry to throw someone in the house just because they put an application in and they have a deposit to put down on the property. It's too easy to make a mistake. And when you make a mistake like that, it really ends up costing everybody, and especially it costs the owner, because that person could they could stop paying rent, could tear up the property. We might even end up having to evict that person from the property.
So, Scott, could you tell us a little bit about your good tenant guarantee and why do you feel so confident offering that?
Yeah. The good tenant guarantee basically says that, look, if we fully vet that tenant and we still end up having to evict them from the property, because as I said before, there's no guarantees that the person that you put in that property might end up at some point having to be evicted from the property. So even if we go through all those steps and everything looks great, we put that person in the property, let's say we end up having to evict them at some point, our company will split the cost of that eviction with the owner. Oh, and not only that, but we also are going to replace that tenant without charging another leasing fee to the owner. And the reason that we offer that program at all is just because it hardly ever happens. I mean, we do end up having to do some evictions. We do, but when we're following our normal procedure for tenant screening, we don't usually wind up in a situation where we have to evict that tenant.
I see. So, what would you say to property owners who do feel hesitant about trusting a property management company with their biggest asset?
Yeah, that's a good question. You got to vet that company just like we vet tenants. Just be careful. Look at their customer reviews. Make sure that you aren't signing up into a contract that you can't get out of, even though the state of Oklahoma, you are required to have a certain period of time. There has to be a term in your contract because it's a real estate, so in order to be a legal real estate contract in Oklahoma. But you can also put in that contract that either party can cancel with 30 days notice. And if that's not on there, and especially cancel without penalty. Look, the way I've always felt about this is that if an owner, like if they want to do something different, they're not happy, I'm not going to keep them tied up for months and months waiting for the contract to finally end.
Which, by the way, we had a whole episode where we talked about what to look for in a good property management company. But how do you handle situations where a tenant damages the property?
We always have the security deposit as a backstop. Also, if pets are involved, through our pet guarantee, we have $1,000 backstop for the owner against pet damage, which is in addition to the security deposit. And one of the things that, like a kind of a minimum thing for us, is to do at least one interior, we call them a maintenance survey, during the year while the lease is going on, just to see how the tenant is treating the property, and if there's any red flags as to the condition of the property. So it's important to keep eyes on the property for sure.
Okay. What would you say to property owners who've been burned by bad tenants in the past and they're afraid to rent again?
Yeah, I talked to some people like this as well that have leased out the property before, and they've missed some things when they've done their vetting process. And so what I would say to those people is it all comes down to vetting, the vetting that you do on the tenant, and then how the management goes once you get them into the property. If you do a good job of vetting, that eliminates 95% of the headaches.
Makes sense. So, if someone is interested in working with your company, what's the first step they should take?
You can always go to our website and get more information. I mean, there's gobs of information if that's kind of what you're looking for. You can also schedule a consultation with me. Always happy to do a free consultation. If you go to the website and just click on request an appointment, go on there, book on my calendar, and we can talk. That's probably the
Awesome.
best way. Okay.
Great. Well, that's all the questions I have for this podcast. Again, if you heard something that resonated, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe so you catch the next one. If you have additional questions about property management, or you have a property in the OKC metro area, if you have any additional questions about property management, or you have a property in the OKC metro area, you can go to Your OKC Property Manager.com and go into the show notes to see that website, and feel free to reach out to Scott. Thank you, Scott, for answering all of our burning questions today.
Thanks, Siva. Appreciate your help.
Bye.